Welcome to the Zandbergen Report, where wealth strategies and investment wisdom collide, featuring your distinguished host and certified financial planner, Bart Zandbergen.
Welcome to the Zandbergen Report, a showcase for wealth strategies and investment wisdom that's essential for our evolving world. I'm your host, Bart Zandbergen, and with me is my partner, Letitia Birbaum. Letitia, welcome.
Thank you, Bart.
Paul, nice to see you again.
Nice to be here and in your magnificent presence, both of you here, ready with my pen and paper to take notes.
No running in today.
Well, it feels like we've been gone for so long, but it hasn't been that long, right?
It hasn't been that long. Well, it's 2019 now, so we're off and running.
Yeah. And there's no wine to be seen, so...
That was, I got to tell you, we had more crazy reaction to that wine show than anything else I've seen on any of our shows. People still talking to me about that one here. The numbers just spiked up on that one, so maybe, we could do that more often.
I think we should. But I think we need to start with Letitia's new gift here.
Ah.
Yeah. So, Paul, have you ever seen anything like this? There's a tile.
A tile? No. Why would you put a tile on?
Letitia, would you please tell everyone why you have a tile on your keyring? Am I embarrassing you by chance?
Shaking your head, no.
Well, of course, because in case you lose your phone, you press the tile button that's attached to my keys and I find my phone.
Or vice versa.
Or in case I lose my keys, I can find my phone. So... the best part is when your 3-year-old or your 5-year-old decide to play a joke with you in the morning and hide your keys.
Oh, yeah.
You press the button and then all of a sudden your phone starts singing a song and you are not late.
Is that a service that you subscribe to, or is that just a device that you paid for once? I never have seen. It's such an obvious thing. I've never thought of that or seen.
So this is definitely not a paid plug, but by the way, there's opportunity that you can use the tracking system so you can pay for it if you want, or if you don't, you don't have to. I think it limits the range of being able to find it. But for me, I think it is fantastic because, I always feel like when I get busy, I just need to make sure I know where everything is at all times so I can...
I will report back as to the percentage of days she's late for work.
Yeah, right. And she can't say, well, I lost my keys.
Yeah, it's no longer a loss of keys. All right. Well, thanks for sharing.
Reluctantly.
On a more serious note, we're going to talk today about...
losing things.
About losing things.
Losing more stuff.
Hacking, fraud, etc., which, as we have discussed, is in all areas of life, especially in financial life. We have internet-based systems that store things on the cloud. We do wire transfers that transfers money from one account to another. And as time goes on, the fraudsters have become trickier and trickier.
More sophisticated.
Yeah, maybe that's better put. But we want to talk about some things that can be done and hopefully to help avoid that.
Can I just throw out one statistic here?
Yeah.
That, we had somebody come in a while ago, and he was did high-level internet security for Visa and other things. He's like one of these geeks that they hired to go in and hack a system and figure out where the vulnerabilities are, which they're constantly trying to do. And his theory, I've heard this before, is it's not a question of if you're going to get hacked, if your identity is going to be stolen. It's a question of when. So his response is, it's not so much, yes, you can try and do some things to be smart and not make it happen, but how quick do you find it and what do you do?
Yep, those are all good points.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Bart, where do you want to start? So, some typical things to avoid or knowing if you're vulnerable. I would say maybe knowing if you're vulnerable, like what are some of the things that puts you at a place of being vulnerable?
Sure, let's start there.
So I don't know if you guys have ever gone to a hotel traveling and you bring your laptop with you or your phone with you and you use the wireless internet, or if you're at a coffee shop and you're using the wireless internet. These are very often open places that you can have access to the Wi-Fi for free, and you don't have to pay the extra money to have a secure Wi-Fi. Well, when you do that, you are opening yourself up for an opportunity for someone in there to be able to have access to your information, which is a big no-no, a big absolute no-no, but just in general, that's something that people are putting themselves at risk just by using the free internet in the cafe.
And which is a hard discussion with my kids who will do anything for free. And they wonder why I pay for movies and pay for music, and not that there's fraud there, but when I'm at these sites, coffee shop, wherever, and offers free, if I have data, I see that I have data, I will not go to any free Wi-Fi for those reasons.
Yeah. No, it's absolutely important that you do that as well.
Can I give you one other one that this guy brought up?
Yeah.
The Internet of Things. Our house is more and more filled with things that are connected to the Internet. It might be as silly as it sounds, your refrigerator or your printers. And those things,
or
your tile. And he did a demonstration. He said, "What's your internet?" We went on and looked at it. He said, "Let me just see how many open devices are in this. We're in an office building here, and everybody you would think has a secure network, and they do, of course, but their printer's not secure, or their something else isn't secure. Their internet, another enabled device that they have other things that you're not putting up barriers to." How about that one? So through the refrigerator, you break into your home network.
So we, this is a real example. So have a client, this was a couple of years ago now, a small business, and long story short, he was held ransom. His system was, all his customer base, all his files were held ransom.
Yeah, ransomware they call it.
Yeah. And he ended up, the FBI got involved. He ended up paying the ask, which was, I think, everything is relative. I think it was a $10,000 or $15,000 ask, which also tells us that the hacker had the ability to know what the person was willing, or the company was willing to pay, or could pay easily. And so we paid it. Everything did get restored, and the agency that was involved, and I'm going to say it was the FBI, said, "Look, if you don't pay it, you're going to pay so much more to redo your systems to try and recoup everything that you've lost." And then the other thing is the vulnerability ended up being, and I'll stop there for a second, his response was, "Look, I have everything. We've got all this hacking control and fraud control. The printer."
The printer, yes.
Yeah.
It's part of the network, so they got into the printer, and the printer was able to go into the system.
Right. Because we're out using Wi-Fi-enabled printers, we're using Wi-Fi-enabled devices to connect, and those quite often don't have any sort of password protection on them, because it's the printer. You want it to be connected all the time.
So I think the takeaway from that story is check all of your devices and make sure they have the proper security levels.
Exactly, and you're making sure you're putting codes and passwords in before you're having to connect in, even on your phones. And
how often do you guys change your passwords? That's another one.
So that's one of the we're getting to that, but also what are some of the solutions? I say you should change them frequently. I mean, at least every 30 days. We're required to change our variety of passwords very frequently, and so at least every 30 days I do, even though it's slightly annoying. But I wouldn't say to be honest, I probably don't do every one of my passwords, but the main ones, like my banking institutions or my credit, or things that all of my financial stuff I do quite frequently. And then secure websites that I know that are protecting data, I change those as well. And then another level, I also create different creative passwords, and I subscribe to an application that I can connect to. It's a secure website that I need my fingerprint to open up, and it has multiple step authentication, and I save all my passwords on there, and that actual application will create random passwords for you, and then it stores it in its security, and it remembers it.
You'll have to put that in the show notes, because I'm always using the same 4 or 5 in a rotating sequence here.
Yeah. So that, but if you have one, all of a sudden they find one for one institution, then they can use it and then apply it for others. And a lot of people do that. They use the same, or if they find something that's maybe not as secure, like your personal email, but then you end up using it at the same thing you use for your office, well, then now all of a sudden maybe you're more vulnerable on your personal side, because you're not thinking, it's as big of a deal, but then you use it the same password on a business side, and then all of a sudden you've opened yourself up to all this extra exposure. So,
and can I ask you one other silly question that many people have brought up? and I'm terrible at this. I don't know about you guys. Where do you store the passwords? Do you just try and remember them all, or do you write them on a piece of paper and do what you're not supposed to do and stick them in your wallet or under your computer or something?
I think that process has evolved for me. Now, since I've known Bart, my process has evolved. I used to have an Excel spreadsheet that I used to have locked, and then I would update that. And then now, but the thing is that Excel spreadsheet wasn't everywhere that I was, so super annoying sometimes. But Bart introduced me to this great link. It was called LastPass, and they have free versions and paid versions. We do the paid version. But it's been great, and they have a lot of different apps out there that do the same thing, but it's secure, and then I'm able to, it launches the website, it'll, it'll update my username.
Can you put these
password
in your show notes and stuff?
Yeah.
I think people would want to download these.
Yeah,
things.
I think it's been great for me.
And I was trying to set you up for the thing you guys always tell me that you have this plan for all your clients, and in there are things like passwords, because I always wonder, I said this on one of the show, if something happened to me, I don't know, nobody would know all my passwords to get into my social media or the bank or anything.
Yeah.
Then they wouldn't be able to get into your vast wealth.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
But
they
it's
couldn't
important
find that 50 cents.
to have it secure. It's important to have it secure at every level, just to feel that you understand. So we talked about a lot of different things. Did you want to add a little bit more? Or do you want to transition to like emails and
you want to go there, or do you want to go
calls?
for? I mean, there's fraud can happen electronically. We're talking about fraud and protecting your money, so it can certainly happen electronically, which seems to be big now. But there's still the old-fashioned way.
Yeah,
and a couple of the ways that come to mind. One are called affinity group fraud. So this is someone who gets involved with maybe a church, maybe with a charity organization, becomes really, really close and tight. And oh, by the way, I happen to represent this, or I'm an advisor of this, and then collects all this money, and then and then can turn that into, it could be some sort of a Ponzi scheme. And I mean, a perfect example of that is Bernie Madoff.
Right.
And his affinity group was the Jewish community, and everyone trusted him, and he donated a lot of money, and obviously most people know how that ended. But just, that's something to look out for.
Yeah.
And let's be clear here too. We're not saying that everybody that belongs to a church, everybody belongs to a charity group that may approach you is like that. But I would say just be aware that's how some people operate.
A great thing to add to that is, so a way that you can prevent yourself. So say you know someone in an organization and you trust them and you feel comfortable with them and you want to invest with them. Something that you can then do is know your salesperson or know the person that you're working with, and there's places that you can go do research. Like, we're advisors, you can do broker checks on Bart and I and make sure the things that we're doing is legal, or we don't have records, or we have history, and things like that help you protect you. It's another level of security, so making sure that person is actually legitimate. Just doing an additional level of research and asking them questions and just knowing what you're getting into ahead of time instead of just blind faith of saying,
what
okay,
questions
great.
would you ask them? As soon as you said that, what would I wouldn't even know what to ask. Do you have it secure? Yes.
Yeah, so I would start digging. So it depends on the situation to be able to identify what questions to ask. But, technology these days, people who are frauding you, they're pretty sophisticated. So something can happen really quickly, and a sense of urgency is usually a sign of questions. But if someone sends you something, you want to use like fraud. Bart, you want to use an example on this one? Of what questions to ask?
Yeah, so, I mean, again, it depends on which category, but if someone is representing or recommending an investment to you, maybe the first question I would ask is, oh, great, can I see a prospectus? Okay. And if there's no prospectus or no documentation, I think that's a huge red flag.
Yeah.
What can we, get the name? Can I look you? I'm going to look you up.
Are they a fiduciary? So then you ask them about their credentials, and then you don't just ask them questions. Then asking them questions is the first step, but use that as the first step, and then you go in and you look up online independently, and then say that, for example, they're asking you about an investment, call the investment company. Find out, make sure it's a legitimate company. I know all these steps sound really crazy, and after you've established relationship, it's not necessarily as important every new investment.
We all hear about, particularly seniors, that get called up and scammed all the time. And I always wonder, how can anybody be that dumb? But it is, they have an offer that's too good to be true. It's urgency. They seem to know something about you.
Yeah, so, and that kind of falls into another category too, is seminars, and seminars seem to attract elderly because they're bored, they need something to do, they like the free dinner. And so we see a lot of fraud happening in that area. Again, not all seminars are fraudulent or bad people, but that is a kind of a nesting ground for
or that. Even the phone or the internet. Like my grandma was subject to that. She would be sitting there at home all day, and people would call her all the time and say, hey, and especially with your personal information maybe taken or being vulnerable from a different source somewhere else, and they have it, and they know all the right questions to ask, but they don't know, like, your social security number. They don't have your, some specifics like your birthday, your driver's license, or credit card. So I would recommend never giving, unless you initiated the call, never giving them like your social security number over the phone, or bank account information and credit card information. Those are the calls maybe you initiate to be able to provide that information, but don't just, if they're asking you questions and it sounds like they know all the right things, they might not be legitimate, and so that's when you might be a victim of a scam. So that's when you don't give them your credit card information and you don't give them your social security number, because they might have all that other information in front of them. They're just missing those pieces, and then all of a sudden they're opening accounts for you under your name, or credit cards, or taking advantage of your accounts. So,
can I give you two recent scams that we got alerted to at the radio station? One of which my aunt, my late aunt who passed away last year, almost fell victim to. They call up and say, we're with the IRS, and you owe us a bunch of money.
I got that call too.
Yeah, right. And it's a real high pressure thing, and we're gonna. The next step is jail, and if you don't cough up something, they know all these facts about where you live and all these other things that they've looked up in a database. That's one.
Yeah.
And the other one, of course, is they call up and say something like, hey, I'm calling from Visa. I get these emails, I just got one the other day from iTunes. Hey, somebody just bought something in your account. You better check this out. And in opening up that email and checking it out, you have inadvertently given them access to your account.
So if you get an email from somewhere that you don't recognize that link, and then it has a link inside of it, you don't want to open that link. And a lot of times you don't even realize it's an email of something that it just looks generic, and then it says click here, and you click on it, and then all of a sudden it takes you to this. It doesn't look like anything's happening, but really what you've just did is you've downloaded a virus or allowed them to be able to get into your computer and take your data. So this can happen via email all the time, and you don't even know it happens, and maybe your information is being hacked, and then all of a sudden it's used for something else. And so some industries are being preyed upon to be able to have that happen as well.
Can we take a commercial break and then come back and maybe give some tips on how to prevent any of this stuff here?
Yeah, sure. Let's do
that. Let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back after word from our sponsors.
With more than 25 years of experience, Bart's comprehensive perspective has earned acclaim from clients across the globe. Gain access to lessons learned throughout Bart's career by following at Bart Zandbergen on Instagram. To learn more about Bart Zandbergen as an advisor, mentor, and public speaker, and for more information on Optivest Wealth Management, please visit www.bartzandbergen.com.
All right, we're back talking about that topic nobody wants to deal with. We always want to stick our head in the sand. Fraud, particularly online fraud or mail fraud or email fraud. I had a friend of mine, and it was an attorney. They went and stole his checks right out of his mailbox and used those. I don't know how they knew his checks were coming that day, but they found the real hard checks that he had sent away for and took them and wrote checks on them.
Yeah. By the way, when you say mail fraud, it's MAIL, right?
Well, anything today, yeah.
All right, so we're going to shift gears a little bit, and just speaking from experience on some email-oriented fraud. So through the over the years in my business, some years ago, we got a request from a client via email to send $5,000 to me at this particular address. I'm traveling. And at first it kind of made sense. It was a client that did a lot of communicating via email. But there was a couple of words. I communicated with this client enough to know his tone, his rhythm.
Yeah.
And a couple of words where it just seemed a little bit off. Also, my back office guy kind of felt the same way. So we called the client.
By the way, that's always our first practice. We would never just send money, but just calling the client first.
Yeah. I will say early, when I say early, 10 years ago, that wasn't. We didn't have that as a rule. It quickly became a rule as this practice has become more normal.
Yeah.
Called the client. He said, "No, absolutely, that was not me." And it's happened a few times since. And with the new protocol of anything that gets sent, other than the client's own checking account, which we have other procedures for, you call the client and you get a verbal. And then we've taken it to a whole new level. And now you also ask the client a few questions just to confirm it's the client. So those are ways to, as annoying as it sounds, and for some clients we've had for 20 or 25 years, we know this is annoying, but we're going to ask just to make sure.
Some security questions.
Yeah. And it's also related to wire fraud. There was a case recently where you talk about an attorney, Paul. An attorney sent an email that said, "Hey, the wire instructions for the purchase of this house have changed. Send it to this new address."
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that. Yeah, right. And the new address is a scam.
And it's a bank, right? So it's a wire transfer to a bank with an account number and a routing number and everything. Everything looks the same. Everything's exactly the same. Email is the same, but it requires the phone call and it requires double checking. And we've learned recently there's different terminology. There's certainly hack. I think everybody knows what hacking is when someone gets into your stuff. Another term is called hijacked, and another one's called spoofed.
Tell me hijacked and spoofed. What are those?
So hijacked is, in the case of this attorney that I was just talking about for the wire fraud, his email was taken over. And
did he know that then?
He did not know it. And I have another client where this happened to as well. This other hijacked was also asking for money, and we were able to figure it out. So the owner of the email stops getting regular email, and this person has somehow, and I don't know how they do it technologically, but it gets rerouted, and someone is an imposter of this particular email. So, and in the case of this, we also think that this lawyer's phone was also somehow taken over.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
We did a show with the Port of Long Beach a couple years ago. On they were talking about cybersecurity and the amount of fraud where people will just show up with a false bill of lading. They don't break into the shipyard or the warehouse anymore. They just show up and say, "Here, I've got what looks like it." And they do it by intercepting something, just what you're talking about. They found out a shipment has arrived and what it is, somehow through some email intercept, and then they print out a fake document, say, "Here I am, I'm XYZ shipping here to pick this up," and it looks okay, and you give it to them, and they drive away.
They prey on people like that. So, for example, they know the type of people who are the key players, like the people who are that are sending out those notifications for the shipping docks or their crate or whatever that is, and then they take over their email. So it sounds like it would be legitimate because these fraudsters are very, very smart and they're taking over the right people's accounts. So again, preventing this is you go in and making sure that your security is protected. You have multiple layers of additional protection of your security. That might be, are you using a program to be able to make sure that there's firewalls in place? And then is there additional ways that you're saying, okay, in addition to that, what are other ways that you're being able to protect your email addresses or security?
How would I even know if I've been hacked? That's what this other guy was saying. I wouldn't really honestly know that my email had been hacked until I got hit.
Unfortunately, that's what we've experienced, that exact same thing.
You don't know.
You don't know. You don't know. You could be the person who's taken advantage of, or the person's email has been hacked is actually also the victim as well. Yeah.
And unfortunately, what we're finding too is that the agencies, the legal agencies, they're so overwhelmed and inundated that it's unless
don't want to hear about it.
It's a huge case they're really not that interested.
So you can still call. It was really interesting. There's places and people you would call in case that happens. Like, so if it was like, like this, in this case, a wire fraud, you would call the institution that the money was being sent to, and you ask them to recall it and have it being pulled back. And then you contact the institution that the money was sent to and ask them to push it back. So you're asking both sides. And then also, in addition to that, we contact the FBI, and we want to make sure that they're involved, because now this is fraud of someone's assets. And sometimes people contact the U.S. Security and Exchange Commission or the financial industry regulators.
If it's big enough, you got to go big. Yeah, you got to find people.
Yeah, but there's people you can communicate with, and there's things that you ask. But in general, and we can put all this stuff on our Cliff Notes, so you can find like where to go and tips and who to contact in case things happen to you, and to protect yourself, and then where to go if you. You
guys run so much of your clients' lives. Do they come to you ever? Do they ever ask for your advice in helping to set up systems or to do anything else to lock down their finances and whatnot? Or do they just is everybody on their own to do this?
Well, we talk to them and we coach them pretty much on a regular basis to be careful of these things. So I would say yes.
Yeah, because I know you guys keep records and other things, pretty elaborate records about your clients and whatnot.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then that last term, just to finish up on this, is it's a kind of a funny sounding term. It's called spoofed.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's when someone's email. So it's different than hijacking, because hijacking is the email and someone else is running that email as an imposter. But spoof is the email looks exactly the same, but it might be another letter in it, like they've added an L somewhere in it. So at first glance, especially if it's like the number of people, you don't notice that it's different, but that's the one.
It's from Paul Roberts with a 1 at the end or something. Here.
Something like that line. So Paul's no longer getting it, so he's not alerted to what's going on with whatever the situation is.
And then there's the old phishing where they just want you to open up. It's something dumb. They want you to open it up so they can either put a virus on your computer or they can somehow grab your email or your login information when you follow some instructions.
Yeah. So I think the parting words are just to be cautious, be careful, and be aware.
And be alert that it's out there. I think that's the thing. I live in the minnow mentality. If I'm swimming with enough little minnows like me, I won't get eaten up. There's just too many of us but I think that's just not true anymore. We've all been hit in various ways, shapes, or forms.
I think we all can be victims.
All right. How do they reach you guys if they want to learn more about all the services you provide? All these things you tell people that, from how to do wine to how to prevent fraud here.
Go ahead, Letitia.
So you can go on our Podbeam and find our show today, and it is, if you can see it on our video here, it's Zandbergen Report, Wealth Strategies, Investment Wisdom. You can find us on Instagram, and Bart and I have our own Instagram. Mine is Letitia Berbaum. It's LETITIA BERBAUM. And Bart, you want to...
Sure, and it's bartzandbergen.com, and you can also email us at the show at podcast@bartzandbergen.com, BARTZANDBERGEN.com.
And you can also look up our firm, OptiVest, and you can find out more about us and just ways that we're trying to be ahead of the game and help protect you and being more secure and protecting your assets.
Okay, until next time.
All right, thanks everyone. Cheers.
Tune in next week for the latest edition of the Zandbergen Report, Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Catch up on our recent shows by visiting bartzandbergen.podbean.com. The Zandbergen Report is also available on iTunes, iHeartRadio, and Spotify. Interested in being a featured guest on our show or have a question you'd like to hear us answer? Email podcast@bartzandbergen.com. Bart A. Zandbergen, CFP, and Letitia Berbaum, AIF, are registered investment advisors with OptiVest Inc. and registered representatives with Gramercy Securities Inc., member FINRA and SIPC. Investment advisory services are offered by OptiVest Inc. under SEC registration.